Life often feels like a series of peaks and valleys, triumphs and challenges, moments of clarity and times of doubt. In the midst of these experiences, it is easy to feel as though you are walking alone, as though the promises God has placed on your heart are distant or even unattainable. You may find yourself questioning if the path you are on is truly leading to the fulfillment of those promises, or if you have somehow veered off course. Yet, the truth remains unwavering. God is faithful, and His promises are nearer than they appear. When the road is long and weariness sets in, we often become tempted to give up, to abandon the dreams and assurances God has whispered into our spirits. But before you let go, consider this. The moments when you feel like quitting are often the moments when you are closest to your breakthrough. The Bible reminds us that God works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose, Romans 8, verse 28. This truth is not just a distant hope. It is a living reality that sustains and carries us through life's challenges. Take a moment to reflect on the journey of those who came before us. Think of Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, unjustly imprisoned, and forgotten. At any point, he could have succumbed to despair and lost faith in the dreams God gave him. Yet Joseph held on, and in God's perfect timing, he rose to a position of influence and fulfilled his purpose, saving countless lives in the process. Genesis 41. His story reminds us that even when our circumstances seem bleak, God's promises remain steadfast and sure. Perhaps you too find yourself in a place of waiting or uncertainty. Perhaps you have been praying for a breakthrough, for healing, for provision, or for guidance, and the answers seem delayed. It is in these moments of waiting that our faith is tested and refined. Psalm 27 verse 14 encourages us with these words, "Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." Waiting is not passive. It is an active trust in God's goodness and faithfulness. Let us not forget that God's timing is perfect, even when it differs from our own. The delay you are experiencing is not a denial, but a divine preparation. In the waiting, God is shaping you, strengthening you, and aligning circumstances to bring about the fulfillment of His promises in ways that exceed your expectations. As you journey through life, it is crucial to remember that you are not alone. God is with you, guiding your steps and surrounding you with His love. He has not forgotten the promises He made to you, and He will not fail to bring them to pass. Take courage today. Even if you feel weary, even if the road seems long, know that you are closer to God's promises than you think. Do not give up, for your faith and perseverance will be rewarded. Hebrews 10 verse 36 reminds us, you need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what He has promised. In the waiting, in the struggles, and even in the moments of silence, God is actively working on your behalf. The Bible is filled with examples of individuals who held on to their faith despite overwhelming circumstances, demonstrating that perseverance and trust in God lead to the fulfillment of His promises. Their stories are not merely historical accounts. They are living testimonies meant to encourage and strengthen us today. Think about Abraham, who was given the promise of descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Genesis 22 verse 17. For years, he and Sarah waited, enduring doubt and the whispers of impossibility as they aged far beyond childbearing years. It would have been easy for Abraham to give up, to believe that God's promise was impossible. Yet, in Romans 4 verse 20, we are reminded of Abraham's unwavering faith. Yet, he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, but was strengthened in his faith and gave glory to God. Abraham's faith was rewarded, and God's promise came to pass. You may be facing what feels like your own impossibility. Perhaps the promise God has placed in your heart seems too big, too far out of reach, or too long delayed. It is in these moments that we must anchor ourselves in the truth of who God is. He is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should change his mind. Numbers 23 verse 19. His promises are sure, his word is unshakable, and his plans for you are good. In times of doubt, it can help to remind ourselves of God's faithfulness in the past. Think of the Israelites standing on the edge of the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army closing in behind them. They had no way out, no visible solution. But God was not bound by their circumstances. With a mighty hand, he parted the sea, making a way where there was no way. Exodus 14. This act of deliverance was a reminder that God's promises are not limited by human understanding or earthly obstacles. The same God who delivered the Israelites is with you today. He sees the obstacles in your path, and he is more than capable of removing them or giving you the strength to overcome them. Psalm 34 verse 17 reassures us, "The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them." He delivers them from all their troubles. Your cries, your prayers, and even your silent hopes have not gone unnoticed by God. It is also important to recognize that God often uses the waiting period to prepare us for what lies ahead. David was anointed as king long before he ever sat on the throne. During the years between his anointing and his reign, David faced countless trials, including being pursued by King Saul and living in exile. Yet, these challenges were not wasted. They were a time of preparation, shaping David's character, strengthening his reliance on God, and teaching him how to lead with humility and wisdom. Your waiting period may feel like a wilderness, but it is a season of preparation. God is using this time to refine you, to deepen your faith, and to equip you for the fulfillment of his promises. Isaiah 40 verse 31 offers this assurance, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Do not underestimate the power of endurance. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Galatians 6 verse 9, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." The proper time is God's time, and it is always worth the wait. One of the keys to persevering is to stay connected to God through prayer, worship, and the study of his word. These practices keep our hearts aligned with his will and remind us of his promises. When we immerse ourselves in God's presence, our faith is renewed and we gain the strength to continue pressing forward. Psalm 1 verse 2 speaks of the person who delights in the law of the Lord and meditates on it day and night. Such a person is like a tree planted by streams of water, yielding fruit in season and prospering in all they do. The path to God's promises is not always straightforward or easy, but it is purposeful. Often, the most profound growth in our faith happens during the times of waiting and uncertainty. It is in these seasons that we come to know God in deeper, more personal ways, discovering his power, his provision, and his unwavering love. Consider the story of the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. After their miraculous deliverance from Egypt, they faced a journey to the promised land that was far longer and more difficult than they had anticipated. What should have taken days turned into 40 years of wandering, yet this delay was not without purpose. Deuteronomy 8 verse 2 explains, "Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years, to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands." The wilderness was a place of testing and transformation. It was in this barren land that the Israelites learned to depend on God for their daily needs, as he provided manna from heaven and water from the rock. It was here that they experienced his presence in a tangible way through the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Though the journey was difficult, it was also a time of preparation, as God shaped them into a people ready to enter the land he had promised. In the same way, your wilderness season is not wasted. It is a sacred space where God is drawing you closer to Himself, teaching you to trust Him more fully, and equipping you for the blessings to come. The challenges you face today are not evidence of God's absence, but of His intimate involvement in your life. He is refining you, just as gold is refined in the fire, so that you may emerge stronger, purer, and ready to fulfill His purpose. One of the most powerful examples of perseverance in the face of adversity is the story of Job. Job lost everything, his wealth, his health, and his family, yet he did not turn away from God. Instead, he poured out his heart to the Lord, wrestling with his pain and confusion. In the end, God restored Job's fortunes and blessed him with more than he had before. Job 42. Job's story reminds us that even in the darkest seasons, God's promises remain true, and His restoration is always greater than our loss. Sometimes the promises of God seem delayed because they involve more than just us. His plans are often interwoven with the lives of others, and He is aligning everything perfectly for the greatest impact. Think of Esther, who was placed in a position of influence for such a time as this. Esther 4 verse 14. Her courage and faith not only saved her people, but also fulfilled God's purpose for her life. If she had given up in fear or doubt, she would have missed the opportunity to be part of God's divine plan. Your story is part of something much greater than you can see. God is orchestrating events in your life, not just for your benefit, but for the benefit of others and for His glory. Ephesians 3 verse 20 reminds us that He is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. Trust that His plan is far greater than anything you could envision for yourself. Another aspect of persevering is learning to recognize the small signs of God's faithfulness along the way. Elijah, after praying for rain during a drought, sent his servant to look for any sign of a cloud. On the seventh time, the servant reported seeing a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea. 1 Kings 18 verse 44. That tiny cloud was the beginning of a mighty rainstorm. You may only see a small cloud of hope in your life right now, a single answered prayer, a kind word, or a moment of peace, but do not underestimate what God can do with it. That small cloud is a sign that His promises are on their way. Keep looking, keep trusting, and keep believing, for the rain is coming. As you wait for God's promises to come to fruition, remember the power of gratitude. When we focus on what God has already done in our lives, it strengthens our faith for what is yet to come. Philippians 4 verse 6 encourages us to present our requests to God with thanksgiving. Gratitude shifts our perspective, reminding us that the same God who has been faithful in the past will be faithful in the future. You are not walking this journey alone. God's presence surrounds you, His Spirit empowers you, and His promises sustain you. The path may be challenging, but it is leading you closer to the fulfillment of what God has spoken over your life. As you stand on the brink of what feels like uncertainty, remember this: God's promises are never delayed, misplaced, or forgotten. What He has spoken over your life will come to pass, for His word never returns void. Isaiah 55 verse 11. Though the journey may be long and the road may be steep, every step is part of a divine plan designed for your good and His glory. The challenges you face today are not signs of defeat, but opportunities to grow in faith and trust. Just as the heroes of the Bible pressed forward despite their circumstances, you too are called to persevere, to hold on to God's promises, and to believe in His perfect timing. Psalm 37 verse 5 encourages us: commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will do this. Take courage in knowing that the waiting is not in vain. The wilderness season is preparing you for the promised land. The trials are refining your character, and the silence is drawing you closer to the one who holds your future. Every delay is purposeful, every hardship is temporary, and every promise of God is sure. When the weight of the journey feels too heavy, Fix your eyes on Jesus, who endured the cross for the joy set before him, Hebrews 12 verse 2. He is your strength, your hope, and your ever-present help in trouble. Lean into his presence, immerse yourself in his word, and trust that he is working all things together for your good. Do not give up. Do not let discouragement steal your hope or doubt silence your faith. You are closer to the fulfillment of God's promises than you realize. Keep pressing forward, for your breakthrough is near. Your prayers are being answered, and your story is part of a far greater purpose than you can imagine. As you step into each new day, carry these words in your heart. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. Let this truth anchor your soul and remind you that God's promises are worth the wait. Stay steadfast, remain faithful, and trust that the God who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. Philippians 1 verse 6. Your season of waiting will become a season of rejoicing, and your journey will testify to the goodness and faithfulness of the one who never fails. You are closer than you think. Keep going. God's promises are just ahead.